In the lead up to Christmas, I was thinking I might get my wife a watch for Christmas. This sent me down a rabbit hole of research and watching various YouTubers talk all about respectable watch brands and what companies have good reputations. Knowing next to nothing about watches before this, it was definitely interesting to learn about the different movements and styles, and also about both Swiss and Japanese watchmaking traditions. Eventually, I stumbled upon a Lithuanian watch company. Yeah, that's right, a Lithuanian watchmaker. Quite surprised, impressed, and fascinated by this, I thought I would make it the subject of today's video. One way to begin the story of this company is to go back to the early 1990s when Lithuania was in the process of regaining its independence from the Soviet Union. At this time, a man named Igor Zubovsky was working at the Vilnius Radio Measurement Equipment Research Institute. Zubovsky and his team were wrapping up a microwave transceiver project that was part of a Soviet government contract, working with the Vostok company in Russia, which not only made watches, but also military electronics. When the Soviet Union collapsed, various banking systems collapsed with it. And as a result, Vostok in Russia ended up paying the Vilnius team for their work using suitcases full of watches. Fascinating, right? Zubovsky says that he took these watches to the local street market and sold them all within just 2 days. With the money raised from selling these watches, wages were paid out to 15 people. It was at this point that Zubovsky and his 3 colleagues made the fateful decision to get into the watch business, deciding that there would be no work in the field of microwave electronics in post-Soviet Lithuania. After about a decade of distributing Russian-made watches, they would go on to collaborate with Vostok of Russia, but design their own pieces that were more suited to the Western market. This would be the birth of the company known as Vostok Europe. Interestingly, their facilities are located on Vytenio Street in the Naujamiestis neighborhood of Vilnius. Any foreigners living in Vilnius might recognize the name of this street, since the Lithuanian Migration Department offices are located less than 200 meters down the road. But anyways, it was in April 2004 that the first collection of Vostok Europe watches was presented at a major exhibition in Basel, Switzerland, and just a few months later, in the summer of 2004, the first shipment of Vostok Europe watches was distributed to other parts of Europe and to the United States. Having now lived in Lithuania for a couple of years, I feel most things that are made, or at least assembled, in the country have a good reputation of quality, but I wasn't quite sure if this also extended to Vostok Europe and their watches. There aren't too many big mainstream YouTubers offering their opinions on the company, but I was able to connect with Craig and Abe of R2A Watches. Craig, the owner of this small, family-operated business in Connecticut, and his colleague Abe explained why these made-in-Lithuania timepieces are something to be proud of.
I like how much they do in-house. There's a lot of small watch brands out there who just copy what other people do. There's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of watches. A lot of people these days, for whatever reason, have decided they want to look like Seiko. So there's a lot of watches out there that look like Seiko. You can't say that about Vostok Europe. They have their own in-house designers, and they literally start with a blank piece of paper and finish with a completed watch. And I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I always have thought was great about the brand.
The price point is amazing too.
Yep.
You look at an Energia for $900, you're getting a 300 meters water resistance, tritium tubes, completely hand assembled. It's a very good value for the money.
I also asked my pal Arnis over at R2A Lentina about his opinion of Vostok Europe. As a Lithuanian guy who's also into watches, I was sure that he'd have a good perspective on the company. Off the bat, Arnis told me that he wasn't a fan of the company, and he said most of his dislike of it had to do with its Russian connection. After all, Vostok itself is a Russian word meaning east, and in the context of the company, it may have some connection to the Vostok Soviet spacecraft of the 1960s. I hadn't really noticed how much Vostok Europe remained connected to its Soviet-Russian heritage until Arnis mentioned it. Well, it's probably because I wasn't looking hard enough. After all, according to its website, Vostok Europe says that each watch model name was dedicated to some of the most significant scientific and technological human achievements. Clicking on some of the watches, you realize that the events and machines are ones that came about during the Soviet Union. Almaz, Ankhar, Energia, Expedition, Limousine, Lunokhod 2, Nuclear Submarine, Rocket N1. All of these names are connected to a Soviet military machine or an event connected to the Soviet Union. This makes me think two things. First, I totally understand the historical connection and the desire to have a theme of names across an entire collection. But at the same time, it does feel strange to me that this Lithuanian company is leaning so heavily into its Soviet roots. After all, Lithuania has put so much effort into removing Soviet-era statues and monuments from across the country. As a side note, nowadays these Soviet-era pieces of stone and metal are most likely to be found in a small tourist attraction outside of the town of Druskininkai named Gruto Parkas, something I'll have to do a video on at some point in the future. But getting back to Vostok Europe, yeah, the fact that it tries to theme itself and its products after so much of the Soviet times just feels strange, considering Lithuania's overall attitude towards the Soviet occupation. I had a chance to discuss this with Craig at R2A, and here's what he had to say on the topic.
I have to say, in a situation like this, you make the best decision you can with the information that you have at the time. When Vostok Europe first started, which remember we're talking 20 years ago, they had a partnership with Vostok out of Russia, which is a completely different company. And it made perfect sense to use Soviet inspirations. There was no negativity towards Russia at that point. Russia was actually trying to integrate itself into the West at that point. So the reality is that nobody could see this coming, and things like that are not easy to change overnight. You have a collection that's been going for a while, you built a watch around it, it's got a momentum. I think it's important to note too, the inspirations, they don't celebrate the Soviet Union any more than they celebrate Russia. They celebrate the individual achievement of the thing that they are inspired by. The Energia rocket, no matter what you feel about the current geopolitical, economic situation with Russia and the rest of the world, doesn't change the fact that the Energia was an amazing amazing technical accomplishment, and not inappropriate to be inspired of a watch. So that I think that's important too. They're not political statements. They're about the tech. They're about the achievement itself. At this point, going forward, I know that any new inspirations you're going to see are going to be something else. That's why the celestial objects. That's why he's looking at doing it with the scientists. I definitely do not see him doing another, inspiration from the Soviet era. Amazingly enough, we haven't had as much pushback on that as you might think. Our loyal customers don't really care. We could have kept selling actual Russian watches, but we decided not to when the war started.
I think this makes sense. And to be honest, I can't speak for Lithuanians, or anyone else around the world for that matter. So maybe it's really not an issue after all. To be fair to the company, however, its Soviet themes don't make it pro-Russian, particularly in today's climate. In fact, it's worth mentioning that their website and social media currently sport the Ukrainian flag. And in March of 2022, the company released a special edition Ukraine-themed watch to support a Ukrainian military hospital, raising 60,000 euros for the cause. I quite like this one, and how it has the Ukrainian trident, or trizub, at the top, although I'm not sure if I could pull off the yellow bracelet. As for the rest of the collection and the product quality, I guess I don't know enough about watches to make a comment, and I have also yet to hold one myself in real life. Based on just looks, they are generally just too sporty for my liking, and I find that most designs are quite busy and have a lot of text on the dials. Not that you asked, but if I were going to pick a style from their collection, I think the Space Race series fits me the best, but I would probably want something even simpler. Craig and Abe, however, are huge fans of Vostok Europe watches, and they tell me that the brand has developed its own cult-like following in the United States.
We build it almost becomes like a family. What happened to me, I got called for one watch and I fell in love with a brand, and have 60 a couple of years later, is very common with Vostok Europe watches. We have a whole bunch of customers that we know on a first-name basis that they will, every time Vostok Europe comes up with a new watch, they are on the phone with us.
You're talking all numbered limited editions, hand-assembled watches in Vilnius, Lithuania, all have a story behind them, an inspiration. They are all 100% custom. There's absolutely nothing off the shelf on any Vostok Europe watch. They are 200 meter, mostly 200 meter water resistant or higher. And many of them have tritium tube technology, which is your constant illumination technology. For the money, you get a tremendous amount of watch.
If you look at the company's ambassadors, it's no wonder why so many of their watches are on the more sporty side. People they sponsor include weightlifters, stunt pilots, rally drivers, and divers. And their slogan, after all, is watches for going to extremes. But before the video turns into some kind of unpaid promotion, I'll just wrap things up and say that it's very cool to see a Lithuanian company making tough watches. Designed, assembled, and shipped from Vilnius, Lithuania. I think that's a pretty cool thing to be wearing on your wrist. But I'd love to know what you think of Vostok Europe. What do you think of their designs? And how do you feel about their Soviet-themed watch names? Leave a comment and let me know. Well, my huge thanks to both Craig and Abe of R2A for taking the time to speak with me. If you live in the US and are interested in getting one of these made in Lithuania watches for yourself, here's what you can do.
We sell direct on a website called R2AWatches.com. That's the letter R, the number 2, the letter A, watches.com. Obviously, Google Vostok Europe USA, you're going to find us.
Thanks again, guys. And to everyone else, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.